The Case of the Vanishing Gold. A Tale from the Assassin Without a Name by Scott Marlowe. Chapter 1. The Impossible Theft. Merchant Square thrummed with activity. Scribes hurried with ledgers tucked under arms, their quills still wet with ink. Bankers in tailored coats clustered near the columned facades of counting houses, speaking in low tones about interest rates and foreign exchange. Merchants hauled sample cases, guild representatives argued over tariff schedules, and couriers wove between all of them. The clatter of coins, the scratch of pen on parchment, the murmur of 100 negotiations conducted in doorways, under awnings, and in private offices. This morning, like all mornings, Alchester's heart of commerce beat with a relentless rhythm. Inspector William Wright navigated the tide, his attention fixed on the building that dominated the square's northern edge. The treasury rose 4 stories, its white marble facade veined with gold and carved with images of Calendor's prosperity. Overflowing grain stores, merchant wagons laden with goods, and the unique airship docks that promised to elevate the fiefdom to new heights of wealth. Fluted columns flanked the entrance, each as thick as an ancient oak, supporting a pediment where the ducal crest gleamed in the morning sun. Banners snapped in the breeze from poles mounted along the roofline, their crimson and gold bright against the whitewashed walls, and at the center of it all, the massive doors, solid bronze plated in gold, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the light of the square. William's heart raced at the sight. 3 days into his promotion, and here he stood, summoned to the most sensitive case in the fiefdom. The badge pinned to his vest felt heavier than it should. He resisted the urge to check it again. He'd already straightened it twice on the walk over, but his fingers twitched toward it nonetheless, not from doubt in his abilities. He'd earned his rank, solved cases that had stumped men twice his age. But the weight of expectation pressed down on him. The Duke's personal request, the scrutiny of every senior inspector watching to see if the youngest man ever to wear the badge deserved it. He drew a breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped into the stream of officials flowing toward the golden doors. The current carried him 3 steps before depositing him in someone's path. "Pardon me, sir," a passing banker muttered, turning sideways to avoid collision. William sidestepped, only to find himself blocking a courier, then a clerk, then a guild representative with a leather satchel, who didn't bother with apologies but shouldered past with a grunt of irritation. The flow of commerce parted around him like water around a boulder. William stood frozen, uncertain which gap to slip through. "Move, you dolt. You look like a lost apprentice." He picked a current and committed to it, letting the tide of officials carry him across the square. The golden doors grew larger with each step, their polished surface throwing back a distorted reflection of the crowd. Soon the crowds thinned, and the chaos of Merchant Square gave way to a more orderly procession of officials with business inside. William climbed the broad marble stairs, passing between the massive columns and into the shadow of the pediment. Up close, the golden doors loomed even larger, 20 feet tall at least, their surfaces etched with embossed uniform patterns. Inspector Wright. Chief Inspector Bartholomew stepped from behind a column, his gray-streaked beard bristling, and his scowl sharp enough to cut glass. He had his arms folded across his barrel chest, his posture radiating the particular impatience of someone kept waiting. "Kind of you to finally join us." William's stomach sank. He'd lingered too long in the square, gawking at the building like some provincial clerk on his first visit to the capital. A poor first impression, and Bartholomew wasn't the sort to forget. "My apologies, sir. The crowds—" "Spare me." Bartholomew turned on his heel. "The senior inspectors arrived over an hour ago. Follow me. I know I don't need to remind you not to speak about what you see to anyone. This matter does not leave these walls." "Of course, sir." William fell into step behind Bartholomew, stifling any further excuses. Better to keep his mouth shut and his eyes open. The massive golden doors groaned inward at Bartholomew's approach, pushed by 2 guards who strained against their bulk. Beyond lay a long antechamber, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, its marble walls lined with a dozen treasury guards standing at attention. Grim faces stared straight ahead beneath plumed helmets, their ceremonial halberds held at identical angles. The air changed the moment the doors closed behind them, cooler, quieter, carrying the faint mineral smell of old wood and the bitter odor of lamp oil. William catalogued details out of habit. The guards stood at precise intervals, 8 feet apart, close enough to support each other if trouble arose. No windows, a single entrance behind them, no visible exit ahead. Anyone attempting to breach this space faced a gauntlet with no cover and no retreat. Whatever its ceremonial grandeur, craftsmen had designed this antechamber as a killing ground. The 2 inspectors' footsteps echoed upon the marble floor, the sound swallowed by the height of the ceiling. Bartholomew moved at a brisk pace, offering no commentary, and William kept up without complaint. At the far end, the antechamber narrowed into a corridor flanked by more guards, these armored in plate rather than ceremonial livery, working soldiers, not decorative ones. They descended a staircase that curved downward into the earth, the temperature dropping with each step, torches guttered in iron sconces, their light casting uneven light across the steps. At the bottom, another pair of guards flanked a set of doors fashioned from steel so thick that William doubted a battering ram could dent them. The metal gleamed dully in the torchlight, unmarked by so much as a scratch. Slightly ajar, William heard the bustle of treasury officials and others coming from within. Bartholomew stopped before the doors and gestured to an intricate mechanism mounted at their center. 3 keyholes arranged in a line, inspired by the locksmiths of ancient Chorus, each separate, but sharing a similar array of brass gears and tumblers that disappeared into the steel. The vault doors. Ever seen them before? No, sir. Enchanted locks. 3 officials must turn 3 different keys simultaneously, while a 4th speaks the correct incantation. The enchantment changes daily. William leaned closer, studying the lock. The brass working showed no tool marks, no scratches, no evidence of tampering. The gears sat motionless, waiting for keys that only 3 people in the dukedom possessed. "Who holds the keys?" he asked. "The duke's treasurer, the master banker, and the captain of the duke's guard." Bartholomew's tone carried a warning. Not once in Alchester's history have the 3 conspired to steal from the duke, so you needn't waste energy looking there. "Of course not, sir." William kept his voice neutral while his mind filed the information away. To accuse any of them without ironclad evidence meant the end of his career before it had begun. But every investigation required understanding who had access, regardless of their station. And the incantation? Who manages that? The court mage, of course. 4 people then. 4 points of potential failure, each a pillar of the fiefdom's establishment. William didn't believe any of them had conspired to rob the treasury, but someone had stolen the gold, and that someone had found a way past undefeatable locks, guards who never left their posts, and enchantments designed by the finest magical minds in Kalandor's history. How? The question lodged in his mind like a splinter, sharp and insistent. Bartholomew must have seen something in his expression, because the chief inspector's scowl softened by a fraction. That's the question, isn't it? How does someone steal from an unbreachable vault? He gestured toward the doors. "Shall we?" The vault doors swung open on silent hinges, and William followed his superior inside. A flurry of treasury officials and ministry inspectors milled about inside. William had heard tales of the Duke's vault since childhood, but nothing prepared him for the reality. The vast interior had ceilings so high that the uppermost shelves might have disappeared into shadow if not for the spheres of luminescence suspended at regular intervals overhead, illuminating the room with an enchanted light that never dimmed. 7 enormous archways, supported by marble pillars veined with gold, radiated outward from a circular central chamber, each leading to specialized sub-vaults housing Kalandor's immense wealth. The floor gleamed with polished granite inlaid with precious gemstones. Silent statues, sentinels rumored to animate should any unauthorized visitor attempt theft, stood at every few paces. Hundreds of chests lined the curved walls between the archways, each forged from rare ironwood, bound with enchanted steel, and bearing the Duke's seal stamped in gold and precious gems. A single person could manage the smaller chests, but the others' towering heights suggested a certain immobility. Treasury workers moved among them with reverent precision, their official robes emblazoned with symbols denoting their rank and clearance level. At the chamber's center stood the immense treasury scales, masterworks unlike anything in the four fiefdoms. Not the simple balance instruments used by marketplace merchants, but complex devices of brass and silver rising 15 feet high, with multiple weighing platforms suspended by chains of gold. Ancient runes covered every surface, glowing faintly when in use, enchanted for perfect accuracy by the first court mage centuries ago. Legend held that the scales could detect the difference in weight of even a single grain of sand. But it was the vault stacks of gold that took Inspector Wright's breath away. Mountains of coins, ingots, and ceremonial objects filled every corner, so much so that it boggled the mind to wonder how anyone had noticed any missing. "Magnificent, isn't it?" sounded a thin, reedy voice. A small man in elaborate robes approached, the Duke's seal hanging so heavily around his neck that his head drooped. Scribes clutching ledgers flanked him. "Master Banker Ambrose," Bartholomew said. "May I present Inspector William Wright? It was Master Banker Ambrose who discovered the discrepancy." Ambrose's features contorted. "Discovered? As if it were a simple accounting error. Inspector Wright, what we face is impossible. Absolutely impossible." William folded his hands in front of him. "Perhaps you can explain what happened, sir." The treasurer wrung his hands. "Every year, my staff audits the contents of the entire treasury, a process that takes a full fortnight, with our most trusted officials working day and night. Last year's count placed our reserves at 1,532 dukes weight." One of the accompanying scribes stepped forward, holding a ledger so massive that he staggered under its weight. "The Golden Book," Master Ambrose said. "The book contains a record of all vault transactions." Bound in oxblood leather that had darkened to near black with age, decorative brass that gleamed despite decades of handling reinforced the tome's corners. The book's spine, thick as a man's wrist, bore the Duke's seal embossed in gold leaf. As the scribe opened the cover, the pages of the finest vellum revealed themselves, each ruled with crimson lines and inscribed in meticulous copperplate handwriting that flowed across the pages like liquid gold. The golden record of the realm's treasury, accountants numbered, dated, and sealed every page with wax impressions, bearing the mark of each treasurer who had served the crown. Margin notes in different hands showed a layered verification history, with each entry double-checked and countersigned by at least 3 officials. Some of the earliest pages had taken on an amber hue, but not a single entry had faded, a testament to the Treasury's specially formulated ink. The scribe turned pages until he found what he wanted, then ran a finger down a line of figures. "Since then, we have documented expenditures of 236 dukes' weight for fiefdom projects, military campaigns, and court functions," he recited, while tariffs, levies, and fines amounted to 183 dukes' weight in incoming revenue. "Which leaves us with 1,449 dukes' weight," Ambrose said, his voice rising. "But yesterday's count confirmed only 1,297. Somehow, 152 dukes' weight of gold has vanished." The chamber fell silent save for the echo of his last word. Vanished. Inspector Wright frowned. "If I am to understand the situation correctly, you're saying a specific sum of gold, 152 dukes' weight to be precise, has gone missing over the past year. Is that right?" "Not missing," the banker screeched. "Vanished." William exchanged a glance with his superior, who shrugged. Inspector Wright cleared his throat. "Vanished, and not missing, because of the meticulous nature of the audit process carried out by you and your staff, I presume." "Exactly so," Mr. Ambrose said. William now understood the sensitive nature of the predicament. How could he not? 152 dukes' weight of any coinage was significant, but this was Kalandor's treasury, the wealth of their nation. Foiling the vault's protection mechanisms and pilfering such a large sum represented an embarrassment to the crown and a hardship for the people of Kalandor, with higher taxes and the like on the docket to make up for the shortfall. Not to mention the reputational cost to people like Master Banker Ambrose, who was most certainly about to find himself bereft of a job and perhaps even his life. While it remained too early to rule out theft, The notion seemed improbable on the surface. An error in the auditing process seemed the more plausible explanation. However, William knew the master banker admitting to that required irrefutable evidence, as it placed the responsibility for the shortfall squarely on his shoulders. A far easier explanation, the default in impossible situations like this one, was one William cringed even to mention. Yet someone would sooner or later, so he figured he might as well address it now. "I suppose you suspect magic, Mr. Ambrose." "What other explanation is there?" the master banker asked, looking down his nose at William. Blaming magic was all too often a matter of convenience. While Inspector Wright didn't outright dismiss the possibility, his job was to find answers supported by evidence. If the thief had used magic to pilfer the Duke's gold, his investigation would reveal it. But he'd make no assumptions nor draw any conclusions so early in the process. One must maintain an open mind, especially during these early stages. Still scrutinizing William, Master Ambrose asked, "Aren't you a little young for an inspector? As I understand it, they want you to lead this investigation. Is that correct?" Chief Inspector Bartholomew stepped in. "Rest assured, Master Banker. Inspector Wright may look young, but he is a rising star in our ranks, one of our best. Think of Inspector Wright more as a special consultant, one who has the entire office of inspectors backing him. Our help is only a word away. We will find who did this and bring them to justice." Ambrose humphed. "See that you do." While the master banker stepped away to deal with a waiting scribe, Inspector Wright strolled about the room. He heard his superior's footsteps following. Approaching one of the many stacked arrangements of gold, William leaned in for a closer look, careful not to touch anything. "1 year is a long time since the last reckoning, don't you think?" William asked his superior. Bartholomew waved his hand across the vault's expanse. "It's a lot to count. They measure specific lots more frequently on a rotating basis, once a month at a minimum." Inspector Wright looked up sharply. "Was any specific lot found short during the most recent count?" "Not one," Bartholomew said. "All." William considered the implications. But that means the perpetrator had intimate knowledge of the auditing schedule. Enough to know which lots to steal from, but only after the Treasury officials had completed their count. That way, the missing gold remained unnoticed. Chief Inspector Bartholomew nodded his agreement. Not for an entire year, if planned right. "Who knows the auditing schedule?" William asked. "Not many," the chief inspector said. "I have an inspector compiling a list." "Any record of unauthorized entry or tampering with the locks?" "None," Bartholomew replied flatly. "The guards maintain a constant watch. As far as anyone knows, not even a single enchantment has been tripped. Even the dust on the unused chests remains undisturbed." "Which is why," Master Ambrose interjected, rejoining them, "we must be dealing with magic. Dark magic. Nothing else explains it." While the chief inspector promised to turn over every stone, magical or otherwise, Wright continued circling the room, examining the arches, the ceiling, and the floor. Every tile or block fit perfectly, without gaps or seams that might conceal a hidden passage or secret tunnel into the vault. He didn't expect such a solution to present itself so easily, but he believed in thoroughness above all else. Returning to the others, William asked, "What about the monthly audits? When did officials perform the last partial count?" 4 weeks ago, Inspector," Master Ambrose said. "At that interval, a targeted measurement of allotment 13 in the Southern Repository showed everything in order." "And now? Does the latest count of that allotment show a difference?" "Yes." "Was there anything unusual at all about the most recent annual audit? Even the smallest difference from past audits might provide a clue." The master banker gave the question the thought it deserved, but finally he shook his head. "Nothing comes to mind other than that we started 3 days earlier than usual." "3 days early?" Bartholomew asked. "Is the auditing schedule so regimented as to make that unusual?" Ambrose shrugged. "It's a break from protocol, but within my purview. I had the personnel at hand, so I authorized my staff to begin early." William didn't fault the banker for his initiative, but he couldn't help but think the schedule change played a role in the turn of events. He filed that information away until he knew more. "What about the scales?" William asked, gesturing at the elaborate measuring devices. "Are they calibrated and in good working order?" The master banker nodded. "The Ministry of Weights and Measures guarantees it." "Who conducts the measurements?" "I personally oversee all counts," Ambrose declared proudly, "assisted only by trusted officials who have served the Treasury for no less than 12 years. Chief Inspector Bartholomew cleared his throat. "We've already questioned every Treasury official, Inspector Wright. Twice. We've examined the guards' rotations. Gideon Graveshire even inspected for foreign magical auras. He found nothing." Many said never to trust a wizard, but William had met Gideon once or twice and always found him a pleasant, honest enough fellow. If he said magic wasn't involved, then that was good enough for him. Master Banker Ambrose did not share such sentiments. "That doesn't mean magic isn't to blame," he said. "Of course, Master Banker," Bartholomew said, humoring him, "but there is simply no explanation except that someone did the impossible," William said, his mind racing as the mystery took hold. He might be new to the ranks of the Duke's inspectors, but he wasn't an inexperienced investigator. Every puzzle had a solution, though some presented greater challenges than others. "I'd like to see the ledgers for the past year. All of them." Ambrose and Bartholomew exchanged glances. "Inspector," Bartholomew said with forced patience, "these are accounts bearing the Duke's seal, verified by multiple officials. Surely you don't think—" "I think," Wright interrupted, careful to keep his tone respectful, "that when the impossible occurs, we must question everything, even that which seems beyond question." Master Ambrose nodded curtly. "Very well. I'll make the records available. But I warn you, Inspector Wright, if you find nothing, as I suspect you will, I'll personally inform His Grace that you wasted valuable time instead of hunting the true culprit." With that, he spun about and stalked off to attend to other business. The inspectors watched him leave before Bartholomew turned to Inspector Wright and asked, "Any theories?" "A few," William said, but he was unwilling to share them just yet. "I know my involvement in this case is unusual, sir. Truth be told, I'm not sure why Duke Classis personally requested me, but I hope I'll have your full support." "Anything you need," Bartholomew said. "We all want to solve this case as expeditiously as possible. I have others working the case from different angles, but the Duke was clear that you are to have autonomy to pursue your own leads." William felt his chief inspector's gaze lingering on him. "Take some advice?" Bartholomew asked. "Of course, sir," William said, welcoming his superior's thoughts. "A case like this can make or break your career. You're young and, despite what you may think, inexperienced. As you said, His Grace has asked for your help, so follow the clues. But make sure you don't follow them into such a deep, dark hole that you can't get out." "Good advice, sir," Inspector Wright said, unsure if it really was, but grateful that his superior felt compelled to offer any at all. "I will keep that in mind. Thank you, sir." As Bartholomew wandered off to follow up with the other inspectors in the room, William surveyed the gleaming treasure once more. He had jumped when word arrived about Duke Classis wanting him on this case. Who wouldn't? He joined the Ministry of Justice because he wanted to make a difference, and here was his chance. But making a difference meant solving the case, something he wasn't sure he could do. Chapter 2. Following the Clues. Inspector Wright sat alone in a small treasury antechamber surrounded by stacks of ledgers. The closet-sized room served as a temporary office where he examined the financial records without disturbing the regular business in the main vault. 3 days had passed since his first examination of the treasury, and his eyes burned from scrutinizing endless columns of numbers by lamplight. Regardless of the outcome of this case, he was at least grateful that he hadn't chosen the dull career of an accountant. Each ledger was a masterwork of meticulous record-keeping, with perfectly aligned figures, no corrections, and every page-level entry stamped with the Duke's seal and signed by at least 2 Treasury officials. William flipped another page, temporarily removing his spectacles to rub his temples. So far, the ledgers showed a flawless accounting system, which he might have found reassuring under other circumstances. Right now, though, the carefully kept records only deepened his suspicion. A knock interrupted his concentration. "Enter," he called, returning his glasses to their usual place. Captain Renard of the Duke's Guard stepped inside, filling the doorframe with his broad shoulders. "Inspector Wright, any progress to report?" William let out a breath as he leaned back. "Nothing conclusive, Captain? Your men still have found no evidence of forced entry or tampering with the locks?" Renard folded his arms across his chest. "None whatsoever." William nodded slowly. "What about the treasury personnel? Any suspicious behavior, sudden wealth, unusual absences?" "Nobody stands out so far," Renard replied. "I can't vouch for the bankers, but I know many of the treasury guardsmen personally. They're good men, many beyond reproach." "I don't doubt that, Captain, but no one is beyond investigation," William said, perhaps with too sharp an edge. "Still, I appreciate your thoroughness." After Renard departed, William returned to the ledgers with renewed focus. Whoever had removed the gold from the vault had done so at regular intervals over the span of a year. Assuming magic wasn't involved, as Master Banker Ambrose continued to insist, and the scales uncompromised, the discrepancy had to lie in the accounting. But damn if he could find anything. Hours later, he slammed the final ledger shut in frustration. Every calculation was correct. Every withdrawal and deposit documented properly at the time of counting, and again on leaving the vault. Different individuals conducted each count, so short of a conspiracy, which remained a distinct possibility. Everything checked out. Even cross-referencing the monthly spot checks with the annual counts revealed no inconsistencies. The records showed precisely what they should: 1,532 Duke's weight, minus 236 in expenditures, plus 153 in revenue, equaling 1,449 Duke's weight. Yet the most recent audit found only 1,297. A soft cough from the doorway drew his attention. Chief Inspector Bartholomew stood there watching him with a hawkish stare. "Any revelations in those pages, Inspector Wright?" William stood and stretched his cramped muscles. "Nothing obvious, sir. The records appear flawless." "As expected," Bartholomew said. "The senior investigators believe we're dealing with one of two scenarios. Either someone with extraordinary magical abilities circumvented our protections, or it's an inside job," William finished. "Precisely." Bartholomew stepped closer, lowering his voice. "His Grace is growing impatient, Wright. We need answers, not more questions." William met his superior's gaze. "With respect, sir, both theories have serious flaws. If the thief used magic powerful enough to bypass the vault's enchantments, why steal 152 Duke's weight? Why not more? Or less? Why something as specific as 152? On the other hand, if it's an inside job, how did they move that much gold without anyone noticing? Even taken at regular intervals, it's not a small amount." Bartholomew frowned. "What are you suggesting?" William scratched his chin. "I'm not sure yet, but I believe we're missing something." "That much is obvious," Bartholomew growled. "The Duke has granted you unusual latitude because of your unique investigative approach. But remember what I said about deep, dark holes, Wright. Don't disappoint His Grace, the Ministry of Justice, or me." William stared after Bartholomew's departing form before gathering his notes and extinguishing the lamp. Conventional methods of investigation had yielded nothing. Fortunately, he still had some unconventional ones to explore. William valued the other inspector's work, but sometimes one needed an outside perspective. An outside, expert perspective. Rogue's Den had no street-facing storefront or sign hanging over its door. Neither did it have a standard front entrance. All of that was intentional, and while it might seem detrimental to business, the opposite was true. If a person had never heard of the Den or didn't know where to find it in Lowtown, then that person didn't belong there. Fortunately for Barguest, the Den's proprietor, enough folks knew exactly where to find the place to keep up a steady business. Alchemists seeking unregistered ingredients, enforcers between contracts, and the city's most skilled pickpockets kept silver flowing and whispers circulating. But sometimes, a person who didn't belong caught wind of the location and thought they were the rough-and-tumble sort who might fit right in with the den's usual clientele of thieves, cutthroats, and street dregs. Some of these bravados succeeded in blending in, but those who didn't? The city watch usually found them the next morning with a gut full of steel in a back alley or laid out across a sewer grate, their blood seeping into the city's filth. Inspector Wright had no illusions about whether or not he fit in with the den's usual patrons. However, he knew how to appear inconspicuous, and if needed, handle himself in a scrape. That was why, before leaving his office, he'd traded his inspector's coat for a plain brown cloak, its hem frayed from deliberate abuse with a horsehair brush. He pulled the hood low to shadow his face, smudged a bit of ash along his jaw to dull his clean-shaven complexion, and swapped his usual sword for a dagger he tucked into a sheath stitched inside his belt, less conspicuous and easier to deny if someone patted him down. Once he rapped on the door using the ridiculous series of knocks required for entry, 3 quick knocks, a pause, then 2 more, and the speakeasy opened. He lied to the doorman about having any weapons for fear of having his dagger confiscated or piece-bound with a leather strap to hinder his use of the weapon. He knew the criminal element all too well, so he didn't fancy entering such a place without protection. As the doorman unlatched the door, Inspector Wright happened to look down at his polished brown loafers, realizing too late that a change in footwear would have helped sell his disguise. Then the door swung wide, the doorman ushered him inside, and he had no more time for such considerations. Despite his precautions, William felt exposed as soon as the door creaked shut behind him. The air reeked of pipe smoke and the sour smell of cheap ale. Conversations quieted, suspicious glances evaluating him before returning to mugs and cards. William sauntered his way to the bar, ordered a drink he had no intention of drinking, and casually surveyed the room. In the far corner, partially obscured by shadow, a woman sat alone at a table. Even from a distance he recognized her from the descriptions he had gathered. Auburn hair that fell to her shoulders, light skin, fingers adorned with silver rings, and an amused expression suggesting she knew something no one else in the room did. Elizabeth West, master thief, shambler, and the reason he'd come. As he watched, she rolled a set of ivory dice, studying their pattern before gathering them up again. No opponent sat across the table from her, yet she nonetheless seemed engaged in an intense game only she could see. William headed in her direction, aware that several pairs of eyes tracked his movement through the smoky tavern. When he reached her table, Elizabeth spoke without looking up, her words as sharp as the pair of daggers at her belt. "Whatever you're selling, Inspector, I'm not buying it." William frowned. "What makes you think I'm an inspector?" Elizabeth glanced up, amber eyes glinting with amusement. "Where to start? You walk like one, shoulders back, constantly scanning the room. Like a thief, come to think of it. But you're no thief." She nodded toward his feet. "Not with shoes like that. Polished leather, good stitching. Those cost more than most folks in here earn in a month." Her gaze traveled upward. "The cloak's a nice touch, though. Roughed up to look worn. But you tied it with a double-loop clasp. That's military training, or I'm a duchess. Nobody in Lowtown fastens a cloak like that. Your father or maybe an uncle must have taught you because you don't look old enough to have served." She rolled her dice again, letting them clatter across the table before continuing. "The ash on your jaw? Clever idea. Fooled the doorman, I bet. But I used the same trick myself, so it stands out." She gestured lazily toward his face. "And those spectacles? Clean glass, wire frames, no scratches. A working man's eyes go bad, he squints. He doesn't own a pair of lenses that cost more than his boots." Elizabeth gathered the dice and leaned back. "And your hands? No scars, no calluses from hard labor, nails trimmed and clean. You've got a knife somewhere on you. I can tell by the way you favor your left side. But you carry it like a man who hopes he won't need it. A real cutthroat carries a blade like it's part of his arm." "Is that all?" William asked, not hiding his annoyance. Not at Ms. West for pointing those things out, but at himself for his obvious missteps. He would endeavor to try harder next time. Elizabeth shook the dice and rolled. Snake eyes. "You need more? All right, one last thing. You haven't touched your drink. Most people who come in here, drinking is the first thing they do. William frowned, realizing he should do something other than stand there when Elizabeth gestured to the empty chair. Sit down before you draw any more attention to us. Nothing says, I don't belong here, quite like hovering awkwardly. He sat, placing his untouched mug on the table. Now, Elizabeth said. What can I do for you, Inspector? It's Wright. Inspector Wright. Another roll of the dice, and a look that said to get on with it. I'm here because I'm told you have certain expertise. Elizabeth gathered her dice and sat back. That right? I'm curious. How do you even know who I am? I have made it my business to familiarize myself with Mr. Targallus's operation, including the identities of his lieutenants. I know all about you, Garrett Greyfoot, Zara Blackthorne, Nixander Hawkins, and others. All about us? Well, perhaps not all, but enough. My office is investigating several cases involving theft. The Valmont jewels, the Harrington documents, a shipment of alchemical compounds from the Technology Academy, the Mercer silver, the Dawnfire crystal, stolen from one of the most secure private vaults in the city a month ago. That's a lot of investigations, Elizabeth said. Getting anywhere? William made a sour face. As I said, they remain ongoing. Elizabeth drew a dagger from her belt and, grinning, started cleaning beneath her fingernails with the tip. Word of advice? Inspector Wright said nothing, waiting. If I were you, I'd be careful with those names you rattled off. Wrong person hears you mentioning them, and you might wish you'd kept quiet. Inspector Wright sat up. Is that a threat? Elizabeth shrugged. Consider it a friendly warning. Now what do you want? You're ruining my alone time. I assume you're here about what happened in the Duke's treasury? William blinked in surprise. How do you know about the theft? She asked. What else could it be? Duke's guards have been asking about me for 3 days, as if I had something to do with it. I didn't, by the way. Not very subtle questions either. I expected someone to show up eventually. I expected someone older, though. William rolled his eyes, tired of having his age pointed out at every turn. I'm in my early 20s. While young for a person in my role, I can assure you, I earned my badge the same as anyone else. Elizabeth held up her hands in mock surrender. All right then, Inspector. You were about to tell me why you're interrupting my quiet evening alone? Yes, of course. I need insight into how a thief might perpetrate an impossible crime. Oh, is that all? Elizabeth flashed a devilish grin. Lucky for you, impossible crimes are my specialty. But information costs, Inspector Wright. What are you offering in exchange? William had anticipated this, so he said without hesitation, immunity. Elizabeth let out a burst of laughter so raucous it drew glances from around the smoky room. Immunity? For what? You'd need to catch me doing something first, and no one's managed that yet. Not for past offenses, William said, bristling. Official immunity from prosecution by my office, signed by the Duke himself. Good for 1 year and 1 year only. For your expert consultation on this case. William didn't miss the sparkle of interest in her eyes. That's unusually generous, Elizabeth said. She rattled her knuckles on the table, studying the inspector. Her decision made, she gathered her dice and slipped them into a pouch. Tell me about your impossible theft, Inspector Wright, but not here. I know a place where we can talk in private. They exited the den together. Inspector Wright following Elizabeth through a maze of back alleys until he was sure they had left Lowtown behind. Down a narrow alley, Elizabeth finally stopped them in a small courtyard hidden between buildings. A modest fountain, stained and dry, lay at its center. Now, she said, sitting on the fountain's edge, tell me everything. I know it's a theft, but what did the thieves steal? William hesitated. Much of this is classified, so I can only relate. Elizabeth raised a brow. Then why did you ask for my help? Either you trust my expertise enough to share the details, or you're wasting both our time. William weighed his options. If word got out about weaknesses in the Treasury's security, panic would spread throughout Calendar. It might even instill enough confidence in thieves like Elizabeth or a cohort of hers, such as Ms. Blackthorne, to make a play for the fiefdom's riches. But Inspector Wright needed answers. He knew he needed to share the details of the heist with her, but he'd have to exercise caution regarding which ones. "Gold has disappeared from the treasury," he said finally. "A significant amount." "How significant?" 152 dukes' weight. Elizabeth let out a soft whistle. "That's not just significant, Inspector. That's damn near impossible to move without noticing. We believe the perpetrator performed the heist over the past 12 months. Elizabeth contemplated that information and nodded knowingly. Moving a little each time, though that's still an awful lot of money to go missing for nobody to notice. Treasury officials have promised a full review of their auditing process. However, in the meantime, I have a case to solve. As far as we can tell, the vault shows no signs of forced entry. The enchantments remain intact. The guards saw nothing. Yet 152 dukes' weight of gold has vanished. What about magical transportation? Elizabeth asked. Teleportation spells? Dimensional pockets? William shook his head. The court mage found no traces of external magic. The scales then, she said, tapping her fingers thoughtfully on the fountain. Your thief tampered with the measuring instruments. We considered that, but the scales are sophisticated pieces of machinery. If anyone altered them, officials at the Ministry of Weights and Measures would know. Elizabeth fell silent, her brow furrowed in concentration. William crossed his arms, wondering if he'd made a mistake getting her involved. Then she looked up, her expression lit by a revelation. You're asking the wrong questions, she said. What do you mean? You're asking how someone stole the gold without anyone knowing. But what if that's not what happened? William frowned. The gold is missing. A thief removed it from the vault. Is it? Elizabeth challenged. Or is that what the thief wants you to believe? The inspector stared at her, uncomprehending. Tell me, who tallies the results of the audit? Treasury officials. The master banker oversees everything personally. And the ledgers? Who maintains those? The same officials, under supervision. Elizabeth nodded slowly. And they all confirm the theft of 152 dukes' weight of gold? Yes, William said, growing frustrated. That's the problem, as I originally stated. No, Elizabeth said, shooting up. The problem is that you're too focused on what's missing to see what's actually there. William's frown deepened. Speak plainly, please. Real thieves don't work how you think, Inspector, she said, pacing the small courtyard. Magic and brute force? That's for amateurs. The best thefts happen right under your nose without you ever realizing the thief has robbed you. How? Deception, Elizabeth said. The best thieves make you question your own perception. They don't always steal objects. Sometimes they steal truth. She stopped pacing to face the inspector. You're looking for missing gold, Inspector Wright. But what if the gold was never there to begin with? William felt a chill run down his spine as her meaning became clear. You're suggesting falsified records, that some of the gold reported in last year's count might have already been stolen, she finished. You said gold's gone missing over the past year. I think you need to expand your timeline. As the implications sank in, William found himself unable to do anything but return her stare. I think, Inspector, Elizabeth said, that you might have a full-blown conspiracy on your hands. William wanted to groan. Instead, he maintained his composure and asked, But to what end? That's for you to figure out, Inspector. I'm just telling you how a professional might approach an impossible theft. But the records bear the Duke's seal, William said, more to himself than to Elizabeth. Multiple officials verified the entries. I've examined the records and found nothing. Maybe someone duplicated the seal, bribed or blackmailed officials. Nothing is as secure as you believe, Inspector. She reached into her pouch and withdrew something, flicking it toward him. William caught it with a deft hand. He held his inspector's badge. When did you... he started to say before his other hand closed on the badge in his pocket, hidden there as part of his mostly ineffective disguise. I didn't, Elizabeth said, smiling at his confusion. I've never touched your badge, but I made you question whether I had. William studied the replica, understanding dawning. Deception. Exactly, she said. Question everything, Inspector, especially the things you assume are genuine. William held up the counterfeit badge, as if he meant to toss it back to her. Instead, he stuffed it into his pocket. I'm confiscating this. Elizabeth shrugged. I've got more. Now, about that offer of immunity. William took the long way to the treasury. From the start, he'd suspected more than a simple heist. But the more he considered the crime and what Elizabeth had said, the more it made sense that he'd stumbled onto a conspiracy of the highest order. Forget low-level treasury officials and the like. Only someone at the highest levels of government could pull off this sort of prolonged deception. The thought stopped him in his tracks. But what was the motivating factor? Not greed. A conspiracy of this magnitude demanded a grander purpose than mere enrichment. What then? William didn't know. What he did know was that standing idle in the street had yet to provide any answers, so he got moving, returning to the treasury with renewed purpose. He needed to re-examine the ledgers in this new light, as well as the officials who maintained them. Inside the treasury records room, he found a young scribe organizing documents. Leave everything as it is, he ordered, and bring me the treasury's seal authenticator. The scribe looked confused. Sir? The magnifying glass used to verify the authenticity of the Duke's seal, William said impatiently. Bring it here immediately. When the scribe returned with the tool, a complex lens device with enhancing crystals, William dismissed him and locked the door. He then examined the Duke's seal on each ledger from the previous year's count. Hours passed as he scrutinized each impression, looking for any inconsistency, any sign of forgery. His eyes blurred, and his back ached from bending over the documents, but he pressed on, driven by his desire to solve the case. A city bell ringing in the distance signaled the midnight hour before he finally gave up. Unable to find a single discrepancy, he slumped in his chair, dejected and unsure where to look next. A sharp knock startled him. "Inspector Wright?" Chief Inspector Bartholomew's voice called. "Are you still in there?" William stowed the authenticator away and unlocked the door. Bartholomew stepped inside, his expression stern. "You've been avoiding me, Inspector." "Not avoiding, sir," William replied, keeping his voice steady despite his despondency. "Investigating." "And has your investigation yielded any results?" Bartholomew asked, his tone hopeful. If the case remained unsolved, the chief inspector was in as much trouble as anyone else. Probably more so. William hesitated. So far, he had nothing but conjecture without evidence. Still, perhaps his superior's input might help, so he said, "I'm pursuing a promising lead." "Duke Classis is demanding progress, Wright. His council meets tomorrow and His Grace wants answers. Promising leads are all well and fine, but I hoped you had discovered something more." "I understand, sir. I believe our thief may have compromised the Duke's seal and falsified records going back years." The statement halted whatever Bartholomew had been about to say next. After a few brief seconds of contemplation, he said, "A scheme like that could only happen if someone high up were involved." "Yes, sir? You have proof of this?" Again, William hesitated. "Well, no, sir, not yet. I need a little more time to piece things together. If this conspiracy does go to the highest levels, I remember what you said, sir, and I plan to stay as far away from deep, dark holes as I can manage." The chief inspector grunted. "See that you do. Continue your investigation. This case has too much attention on it for failure. Unfortunately, no one else has made heads or tails of it yet." Bartholomew spun around and stomped off. As the echo of his footsteps grew distant, William gathered his notes and slipped them inside his coat. He needed to find evidence, and quickly. Outside, with the night air cool against his face, the feeling that somebody was watching him settled in. He glanced over his shoulder several times, but saw nothing suspicious. Still, his instincts rarely misled him. Someone knew he was getting closer to the truth. William only wished he agreed. Chapter 3. The Truth Unfolds. William spent a restless night in his modest quarters. By dawn, he had formulated a plan, though not a very good one. The first step involved examining more treasury records, an idea so depressing that he sipped his morning coffee with little enthusiasm. He was about to head out when he heard a knock at his door. He opened it to find Captain Renard of the Duke's Guard standing there. "Apologies for disturbing you at home, Inspector Wright. There's been a development." His interest piqued. William grabbed his hat and coat, and soon the pair strode down the avenue while the captain explained. "My men apprehended a suspected forger early this morning. They found him with materials related to the treasury investigation. I came to fetch you before we began our interrogation." "How did your men even know about him?" William asked. "Anonymous tip," the captain said. "I received a message that read, 'Look past the deception,' along with the suspect's name." William grunted, wondering why Ms. West had further involved herself. Nonetheless, he was thankful for the help. "I've no idea what the message means," Captain Renard said, "but the name checked out. When we arrived at the suspect's shop, we found him attempting to destroy evidence." "What sort of evidence?" William asked. "Papers bearing a remarkable resemblance to official treasury documents, and something you'll want to see for yourself." Captain Renard led Inspector Wright through the winding corridors of the Ministry of Justice, down several flights of steps, and into the dimly lit detention area. The air grew damper and colder as they descended, the scent of mildew mingling with that of burning oil from the wall sconces. They stopped at a heavy iron door. The guard stationed outside straightened as they approached. Renard went straight to a table laden with scrolls and other documents. "What do you make of this, Inspector?" Renard asked, unwrapping a small cloth bundle. What he held resembled the official Duke's seal with remarkable accuracy. William examined it. A counterfeit of the ducal seal, though not a perfect one. "Good work, Captain." "My men have the rest of the evidence locked away." William nodded. "Should we see what the suspect has to say?" The guard unlocked the door. "He's been asking for water since he arrived, sir." A simple request, often denied to suspects to keep them uncomfortable. "Bring him water," William instructed. The guard looked at his captain, who nodded his confirmation. Inside the small cell, a man sat hunched on a wooden bench, his hands trembling. He was neither old nor young, perhaps 40, with thinning hair and the ink-stained fingers of a scribe. His clothes, though rumpled, were of good quality, not the attire of a common criminal, but that of a respectable tradesman. He looked up as they entered. William introduced himself and the captain. The prisoner seemed delighted to see the inspector, but less so with Captain Renard. Inspector Wright held up the seal. "Where did you get this?" The forger looked from the inspector to the captain. "I'll speak only with you, Inspector, alone, please." Renard frowned. "It's all right, Captain," William said. "I can handle this." Renard hesitated, but finally said, "Very well, but I'll remain just outside the door." Once the captain had left, William pulled a stool closer to the prisoner. "What's your name?" "Malden. Ellard Malden." He swallowed hard. "I'm a scribe by trade. I specialize in calligraphy, official documents, that sort of thing." "And unofficial documents, it seems," William added, his tone measured but firm. He tossed the fake seal onto the table. Specifically, forgeries bearing the ducal seal. Ellard shuttered his eyes and sighed. "Yes, though not by choice, Inspector. You must believe me." William leaned forward. "Tell me everything, Mr. Malden, beginning with who commissioned these forgeries." The door opened to admit the guard, who delivered a cup of water. Malden drank gratefully before continuing. "I never dealt directly with the true client," he began, his voice steadier now. 2 years ago, an intermediary named Corvus approached me, well-spoken, expensively dressed. He said his employer needed certain treasury disbursement requests altered. Altered how? Numbers changed to larger values. Ellard wrung his hands before him. "I refused at first. Forging the Duke's seal is treason, but Corvus made it clear that refusal wasn't an option." "He threatened you?" Not in so many words. Corvus mentioned my sister's children in Westbridge. How unfortunate if they had a mishap. Ellard's voice cracked. What choice did I have? William nodded but pressed on. Who is Corvus? Who does he work for? He never said, but once, when he was particularly impatient, he let slip something about his master's displeasure at a delayed shipment. Shipment? What shipment? Ellard shook his head. I don't know. I only forged the documents they brought me. Treasury records, mostly. Occasionally, I authenticated diplomatic papers regarding payments to Vrana. William's interest sharpened at the mention of their neighboring fiefdom. Did you see what these diplomatic papers contained? Not in detail. As I said, I merely authenticated those types of documents with the forged seal. Malden glanced up, his expression fearful. You don't understand the danger, Inspector. These people are powerful. When I spotted the guards outside my shop, I tried to destroy everything because I knew the consequences if I didn't. Or did you destroy them because you feared we had discovered your involvement? No, you have to believe me, Inspector. I want to, sir, but I need a name. Someone else to pin this on, or you'll go down for all of it. The scribe shook his head. I told you, I only interacted with Corvus. Malden reached out to clutch William's arm with surprising strength. But whoever it is, if he discovers I've spoken to you, neither of us will live to see tomorrow. You're under ministry protection, William said, though he wasn't entirely convinced that mattered. He didn't doubt Mr. Malden when he said his employer was powerful, but power didn't exempt one from the Duke's law, so the inspector asked with renewed firmness, What else can you tell me about these forgeries? How many documents did they bring to you? Dozens. Treasury records, diplomatic authorizations, shipment manifests. Malden released William's arm. Corvus brought me the latest batch a week ago. Documents concerning Vranan military supplies. William frowned. Vrana is supplying us with military equipment? No, Inspector. Ellard shook his head. The manifest detailed shipments to Vrana, not from it. Along with the military equipment, massive payments for something called Project Nightfall. William's mind raced. Why send military equipment to Vrana? And why all the deception and secrecy? Ellard took another drink. The documents I forged bypassed normal authorization channels. No Duke's Council signatures and no Treasurer's approval. William placed the fake seal in his pocket and stood. Where can I find Corvus? I don't usually find him. He finds me. He comes to my shop every 3 days to pick up documents or to check in. In fact, he's due to arrive this afternoon. If I'm not there, he'll know something is wrong. William knew there was no time to lose then, but he had one more question. Did you ever forge any books or journals? Ellard shook his head. Corvus dropped off sheets of parchment mostly, never an entire book. As Ellard sank into his seat, Inspector Wright left the room. Outside, Captain Renard waited alone. Well? Renard asked. I need Mr. Malden moved to a secure location immediately, William said. Somewhere only you and I know about. You think his life is in danger? I don't know, William said, but better safe than sorry. We may have uncovered a conspiracy that reaches as high as the Duke's Council for all I know. Renard studied William, conflict evident in his eyes. Finally he nodded. I know a place that will work. Few know of it. He paused. If what you're suggesting is true, Inspector, we're entering dangerous territory. We're already there, Captain. William glanced at the cell door. Have the prisoner moved quietly and as soon as possible. Consider it done. Where are you off to? Mr. Malden mentioned another person. A middleman of sorts. I believe that if I can find and apprehend him, I might establish a connection to the ringleader of this operation. Need any help? The captain asked. I'm pretty handy with a sword. More than handy, I imagine, William said. I'll welcome any help I can get. Then let's get to it, shall we? Where do we look first? I'll fill you in on the way. If Mr. Malden is correct, we haven't a moment to lose. Once Renard gave orders to have the prisoner moved, the inspector and the captain hurried into the city. They had a man to catch. Chapter 4. The Middleman. The brass bell above the door to Ellard's shop sang a treacherous melody as Corvus slipped inside, his silhouette framed against the misty street lamps before the door closed behind him. Inspector Wright sat at the scribe's counter, the single dim lantern that cast the shop in amber shadows hiding his face. As Corvus sauntered down a lane lined with oak bookcases on either wall, William shifted so the proprietor's stool beneath him creaked, the sound almost lost amid the gentle ticking of the brass timepiece on the wall. William had long adjusted to the layers of shadow blanketing the shop, so he watched in silence as Corvus approached, his leather boots striking the ancient floorboards with the hollow, rhythmic taps of a man unhurried by, and therefore unaware of, William's deception. By the time Corvus sensed something amiss, he'd missed his chance to do anything about it. "Evening, Mr. Corvus," Inspector Wright said, his voice cutting through the silence. He remained seated, one hand visible on the countertop, the other resting on the hilt of the sword at his belt. Corvus froze, his keen senses piercing the gloom to find the inspector's face. "Who the hell are you? Where's Malden?" Inspector Wright stood, his movements measured and deliberate. The dim lantern caught the polished silver emblem of the inspector's badge pinned to his coat. "I understand you like to threaten people." Corvus's gaze darted about, assessing his options. "I don't know what this is about, but you've got the wrong man." "I think not." Corvus's hand drifted beneath his coat, where William suspected he concealed a weapon. "Hands where I can see them. Don't make this any worse than it already is, Mr. Corvus." Hand still stuffed into his coat, Corvus spun around, making a play for the door, but he stopped short when Captain Renard appeared on the other side of the dirty panes. Indecision quickly gave way to action. Corvus lunged forward, turning the bolt and locking it. When he spun around, he had his lips pulled back in a wolf's snarl. "Looks like it's just you and me, Inspector." William's hand tightened around his sword hilt as he rounded the counter. "I've dealt with worse than you." Corvus barked a laugh, sharp and mirthless. "Have you now?" A slender dagger with an ebony handle and a wicked curve appeared in Corvus's hand so quickly it seemed to materialize from thin air. William drew his blade, a serviceable short sword with a plain crossguard. "You think you've got it all figured out, don't you?" Corvus sneered. "Found out about Malden. Locked him up, I'll guess. But he ain't talking, is he? He knows better. Doesn't matter anyway. He only saw what we wanted him to see. He doesn't know anything." Outside, Renard hammered at the door, the wood splintering around its hinges. "Right! Open up!" Corvus lunged without warning, his knife arcing toward William's ribs. The inspector sidestepped, parrying with the flat of his blade. Steel kissed steel with a high, singing note that echoed through the shop. "You should have minded your own business," Corvus hissed, pivoting for another strike. "My employer has eyes in every shadow in this city. When I tell him what you've done, he'll send men far worse than me to finish it, starting with you." This time, he feinted left before slashing right. William caught the movement a heartbeat too late, feeling the knife slice through his coat sleeve. Pain blossomed along his forearm, but he knew the blade cut shallow, more insult than injury. William countered with a thrust that forced Corvus back against a bookcase. Leather-bound volumes tumbled to the floor as Corvus scrambled sideways, sending an inkwell crashing so that midnight blue liquid spattered across the floorboards. "You're better than most lawmen," Corvus acknowledged, circling. "But I've been dancing with blades longer than you've been alive." William heard Renard's shoulder hitting the door, the wood splintering, and soon, glass shattering. A distraction Corvus tried to use to his advantage, striking with his knife. But William shifted his weight to his back foot, allowing the knife to slice harmlessly through the air. Before Corvus recovered his balance, William brought the pommel of his sword down hard on Corvus's extended wrist. Bone cracked. Corvus howled, the knife clattering to the floor. William kicked it away, sending it spinning under a cabinet. But Corvus wasn't finished. With his uninjured hand, he drew another blade, this one smaller, but just as deadly. He slashed, backing William toward the counter. "I should have slit your throat the moment I walked in," Corvus snarled, his expression contorted with rage and pain. William had a pithy quip ready, but he was too busy avoiding getting killed to utter it. The next exchange happened in heartbeats. Corvus lunged forward with reckless abandon. William twisted aside, but his boot slipped in the spilled ink. Off balance, he brought his sword up too slowly to block Corvus's strike. The small blade caught him across the cheek, a line of fire that welled with blood. William staggered against the counter, knocking over the lantern. It clattered to the floor but remained lit, casting wild, dancing shadows across the walls. Corvus pressed his advantage, bearing down on the stunned inspector. Their faces were inches apart, William's sword trapped between them. "By the time your man makes it inside, you'll be dead," Corvus whispered, his breath hot upon William's face. "And I'll be long gone." William didn't waste his breath on a reply. Instead, he drove his knee upward with brutal force. Corvus doubled over with a strangled gasp. William brought his elbow down on the back of Corvus's neck, sending him sprawling across the ink-stained floor. Before he rose, he positioned the tip of his sword above Corvus's throat. Blood from the inspector's cheek dripped onto the blade, tracking down the steel in crimson rivulets. "It's over," William said, his breathing ragged but his hand steady. Behind him, the door exploded inward with a deafening crack, and in rushed Captain Renard. "Took you long enough," William remarked dryly, not taking his attention from Corvus. Renard's chuckle rumbled with relief. "You appear to have the situation in hand." Together, they hauled Corvus to his knees. Renard clamped iron manacles around his wrists, not caring at all that one swelled from the break. Corvus spat at William's feet, a mixture of blood and saliva. "This isn't over, Inspector." William wiped the blood from his cheek with his sleeve. "For you, it is. But it'll go easier for you if you give up your contact. We know all about the treasury heist, the forged documents. All of it." "I'll tell you nothing," Corvus said. Inspector Wright paused, remembering something Corvus had said. "On the contrary, I believe you've told me everything." Renard lifted Corvus to his feet. "Meaning?" the captain asked. "Meaning, I think I've solved the case." "Bullshat," Corvus spat. "I didn't tell you anything. You don't know a damn thing, lawman." Inspector Wright grinned as Captain Renard led their prisoner away. About to follow, he paused to survey the devastation of Ellard's shop. Overturned inkwells, scattered manuscripts, and broken quills littered the floor. The scribe had his own charges to face, so he wouldn't get the chance to repair the damage. But William recorded a mental note to ensure his family received compensation from the city coffers. "Coming, Inspector," Renard called from outside. William touched the cut on his cheek, feeling the sting of it. "Right behind you." Chapter 5. Case Closed. William and Captain Renard delivered Corvus to central booking at the Ministry of Justice, where the prisoner's broken wrist earned him a sneer from the duty officer rather than sympathy. Once the processing clerks took charge, Renard clapped William on the shoulder. "You fought well today, Inspector. Get that cheek looked at." "I will, Captain. I appreciate your help." "Of course," Renard said. "About the case? You said you solved it? Care to share any details?" "In due time, Captain. First, I need to gather my wits. I'll need to present my findings to my superior before all others." Renard nodded, then excused himself. William watched him disappear down the ministry's front steps, then headed upstairs. The cut on his cheek stung, and the shallow wound on his forearm throbbed beneath his coat sleeve, but neither concerned him as much as the knot forming in his gut. He locked his office, a cramped, musty room on the ministry's second floor, and spread his notes across the desk. The city bells had not yet rung the 5th hour, but already the light through his narrow window had taken on the amber cast of early evening. Gathering his wits was one thing, but he needed to review everything he knew about the case as well. More importantly, he needed to determine if his theory proved sound. One wrong accusation, and he might find himself sharing a cell alongside those he'd already arrested. So, he started with what he knew and worked outward. Ellard Malden, forger, coerced into falsifying treasury disbursement requests, diplomatic authorizations, and shipment manifests. His only contact was Corvus, an intermediary who delivered instructions and collected the finished forgeries. Malden's documents included papers authorizing military shipments and payments to Vrana, all bypassing approval by the Duke's Council under the name Project Nightfall. Above them both, the architect, someone with the resources and reach to orchestrate a years-long theft from the Duke's treasury without detection. William drew his notebook closer. With a lead point sharpened and ready, he wrote 4 requirements in a column. Knowledge of the Treasury's auditing schedule, access to diplomatic channels, authority to bypass ducal council oversight, an intelligence network capable of managing operatives and, presumably, eliminating threats. He set the writing point down and studied the list. The auditing schedule narrowed the field. Treasury officials knew it, but none possessed diplomatic reach or military connections. Members of the Duke's Council had authority, but lacked the operational infrastructure to manage subordinates like Corvus. The spies, the couriers, the enforcers. The military maintained its own chain of command, separate from both the Treasury and the diplomatic corps. Only one office in Alchester met all 4 requirements. William leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. He didn't want to follow this thread. Bartholomew's warning echoed in his mind. Make sure you don't follow the clues into such a deep, dark hole that you can't get out. But the evidence kept pointing in the same direction. Corvus's words from the fight surfaced again, unbidden. My employer has eyes in every shadow in this city. At the time, William had been too busy trying to stay alive to dwell on it. But afterwards, and now in the quiet of his office, the phrase gnawed at him. He'd heard similar language spoken in ministry corridors by men who'd had dealings with the Duke's spymaster. Lord Duncastle cultivated that reputation deliberately. His network reached into every guild, every garrison, every back alley in Alchester. If anyone could manage an operation of this scope while keeping his hands clean, it was him. Then there was the matter of the diplomatic forgeries. Malden described papers authorizing shipments to Vrana, military equipment and payments that bypassed normal council approval. Duncastle maintained Calendor's foreign intelligence operations. He alone possessed established channels to Vrana that existed outside the scrutiny of the ducal council. William wrote a single name beneath the 4 requirements, Duncastle. He stared at it until the ink dried, then closed the notebook. He had no proof. Nothing substantial enough to survive the Council of Magistrates' scrutiny. But he had a theory built on evidence, and theories had a way of shaking loose the truth when applied to the right person at the right time. But how to proceed? He considered different options, always coming back to the one that made his role in this case unique. The Duke had personally requested him. Also, Duke Classis was the only person in Calendor who outranked Lord Duncastle. That gave William at least 2 reasons to contact the Duke directly. But how to discreetly get this information to his grace? Going through Bartholomew risked word reaching Duncastle before William ever set foot in the East Tower. If the spymaster's network had eyes everywhere, even the ministry might not be safe from his scrutiny. William needed a direct audience with Duke Classis, and he needed it soon, before Duncastle had the opportunity to learn what Malden and Corvus had revealed, and take steps to bury it. William drafted a message on ministry letterhead, keeping the language formal, but urgent. I respectfully request an immediate audience with His Grace regarding findings of critical importance to the Treasury investigation. The matter is of the highest sensitivity and warrants His Grace's personal attention at the earliest opportunity. He signed and sealed it, summoned a ministry courier, and sent it to the palace with instructions to deliver it directly to the Lord Chamberlain's office. Then he waited. City bells marked the 6th hour, the 7th. Silence overtook the corridor outside his office as the ministry's day staff departed. William cleaned and bandaged the cut on his forearm, then dabbed at the wound on his cheek with a damp cloth. He rehearsed his presentation in his head, building the case piece by piece, the forgeries, the diplomatic connections, the auditing knowledge, the intelligence network, each point narrowing the field until only one suspect remained. The knock came after the 8th bell. A courier, a palace runner in the Duke's livery, delivered a sealed reply. William broke the wax and read, His Grace will receive Inspector Wright at the East Tower this evening. Present yourself to Lord Chamberlain Prestwick upon arrival. William tucked the message into his coat and reached for his hat. The evening had become cool by the time he stepped out of the ministry and into the street, but the chill suited his mood. He strode with purpose through the administrative quarter, past the columned facades of guild halls shuttered for the night, his footsteps sharp upon the cobblestones. The massive double doors to the east tower stood open when he arrived, flanked by guards whose torchlight cast long shadows across the entrance. William straightened his coat, checked that the counterfeit seal remained in his pocket, and stepped inside. Lord Chamberlain Prestwick awaited him in the antechamber, his ancient face a mask of disapproval. "Inspector Wright, this irregular request has caused quite the disturbance." "My apologies, Lord Chamberlain, but the matter couldn't wait." The old man's gaze narrowed. "The Duke will see you, but not alone. Lord Duncastle is already in attendance." William made his expression stone. "I see." He followed the chamberlain through corridors, adorned with tapestries depicting the fiefdom's glorious history. Ducal guards lined the passage, their ceremonial armor gleaming in the afternoon light. At last, they reached the Duke's private study, a circular room dominated by a massive desk carved from a single piece of ancient oak. Duke Classis looked up from his papers as they entered. Despite approaching 50, the Duke remained imposing, broad-shouldered, with a thick salt-and-pepper beard and piercing blue eyes that looked straight through pretense. Lord Duncastle stood beside him, his lean frame poised with calculated casualness. "Inspector Wright," the Duke said, his voice resonant, "I understand you have urgent news regarding the Treasury investigation." William bowed. "Yes, Your Grace. I believe I've uncovered the truth behind the missing gold." "Excellent. Lord Duncastle is here at his own request. You can, of course, say anything you intend to say to me in front of him." William glanced at the spymaster, whose features remained unreadable. "Please proceed, Inspector," Lord Duncastle instructed. William drew a steadying breath. "Your Grace, my investigation has revealed the perpetrator did not steal the gold in the conventional sense. Rather, they falsified treasury records to cover up otherwise legitimate disbursements." Classis frowned. "Falsified? How?" "Through forged documents bearing a counterfeit of Your Grace's seal." William placed the counterfeit seal on the Duke's desk for his inspection. Lord Duncastle looked on, impassive. "As you know, Your Grace, when Treasury officials performed this year's annual audit, they revealed a discrepancy of 152 Duke's weight in gold. Initially, I suspected a single heist, but I quickly discounted that notion when I learned every allotment had come up short. Whoever took the gold did so over many months, even years, always removing a certain sum after officials performed each regular monthly audit." "This is all fascinating, Inspector," Lord Duncastle said. "But who did this?" "I'm getting to that, my lord, if you will indulge me a little longer." Duke Classis waved for him to proceed. "Master Banker Ambrose first suspected the theft when his staff performed the annual audit of the vault's entire contents. However, the discrepancy only surfaced because he directed his staff to begin the annual audit 3 days early. If he had ordered it done as originally scheduled, I believe the theft would have gone unnoticed this time and remain undetected for at least another year." The Duke looked confused. "What is the significance of the 3 days, Inspector?" "It is my belief, Your Grace, that besides falsifying individual records, the perpetrator also falsified the entire Treasury record-keeping book. The Golden Book, as they call it inside Treasury ranks." "That's preposterous," Lord Duncastle said. "That book is as old as Calendar, worn in ways no forger could hope to duplicate. Not to mention, officials keep the book under lock and key without exception." "I have to agree, Inspector," Duke Classis added. "What proof do you have of this?" Inspector Wright folded his hands in front of him. "Only a hint from a condemned man, Your Grace. But it's the only explanation that makes sense. We know the perpetrator stole money from each allotment in sync with the monthly audits, but this was not a theft by the usual definition. Given the meticulous record-keeping and checks and balances put in place by the Treasury, it's impossible to move any amount of gold out of the vault that isn't meant to leave. When the Treasury receives a writ of disbursement, an official counts and weighs the requested sum, then another official counts it again before it leaves the vault. Discrepancies rarely survive such a process. I therefore believe the Treasury officials performed their duty admirably, fulfilling each writ exactly as intended. Yet funds are missing from the vault, are they not? Lord Duncastle asked. Yes, my lord, William said. I believe we are dealing with two copies of the official record, one legitimate and the other a shadow copy. Duke Classis's fixed stare told him to explain in more detail. In the case of an illegal disbursement, the perpetrator intercepts a legitimate disbursement writ, forges a new writ with an inflated sum, say 520 crowns instead of the original 500, then passes that on to the Treasury in place of the official document, whereupon an agent disburses 520 crowns as requested. But again, the perpetrator intervenes, intercepting the disbursement before it reaches its intended destination, pocketing the 20 crowns before passing off the rest to the legitimate requester. From the Treasury's perspective, all is as it should be, with the requested 500 crowns going to the appropriate party exactly as intended. But what about the inflated writ? Duke Classis asked. The Treasury retains that as a record. Yes, Your Grace. That's why the perpetrator makes sure to replace the forged document with the original. I scoured the records, looking for forgeries of the Duke's seal. I found none, indicating the perpetrator had removed those records. Duke Classis leaned away and lifted a hand to his chin. What about the book? I believe a year ago the perpetrator circumvented discovery during the annual audit by replacing the entire journal with a forgery that accurately reflected the contents of the vault minus the amount pilfered at regular intervals. So, in my simple example, the shadow journal shows a transaction of 520 crowns instead of the legitimate request for 500. Unknowingly using the shadow journal, the Treasury's auditors never realized that a theft had occurred. However, the scheme didn't work this time because officials started the audit before the perpetrator replaced the book with the shadow copy. If not for Master Banker Ambrose's unintended initiative, we may never have known about the theft. Who did this, Inspector? Duke Classis asked, straightening and leaning forward. Give me a name. I have several, Your Grace. First, there's Ellard Malden, who stands accused of forgery. Then there's Corvus, whom Mr. Malden named as a co-conspirator, and the person who coerced him under threat to take part in the scheme. Last, there is the individual in charge, who gave Corvus and many others their orders. William let his gaze fall on Lord Duncastle. I wonder about something, my lord. You haven't involved yourself in the investigation until now, yet you felt the need to come here this evening. Why is that? Lord Duncastle tilted his head in confusion. An abrupt knock interrupted whatever he was about to say. Enter! Duke Classis shouted. In strode Captain Renard, who bowed low. When he rose, his gaze darted to Inspector Wright before returning to his liege. William did not like the worry he saw there one bit. Apologies for the interruption, Your Grace. I have news pertinent to the inspector's investigation that can't wait. What is it, Captain? Inspector Wright asked. The men we had in custody, Inspector. We were moving them and... I'm sorry to say they are both dead. The assassins struck from the shadows. My men didn't know they were under attack until it was too late. I'm very sorry, Inspector. William's attention shot to Lord Duncastle. The spymaster's expression remained muted, though William thought he saw the slightest smirk on his lips as he returned the inspector's stare. Did you apprehend the assassins, Captain? Duke Classis asked. No, Your Grace. Though my men scour the city, I am not hopeful we will find them. That is unfortunate, Captain Renard, Lord Duncastle said. If I can be of any assistance, you need only ask. Captain Renard nodded. Inspector Wright, congratulations on apprehending those responsible, though it's a pity they won't stand trial for their misdeeds. Did they provide anything else of value before their unfortunate demise? Did they name anyone else? William ground his teeth but said, No, my lord. Duke Classis stood. You mentioned someone in charge. Surely he is responsible for the deaths of the other two. I agree, Your Grace, Lord Duncastle said. That's why I offer my full resources to help find this person. In fact, with your permission, I will oversee the investigation personally. Of course, the Duke said. No one is better equipped than you, Duncastle. Indeed, Your Highness. Duke Classis strode around his desk. "Now, if you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I have other matters to attend to. Nice work, Inspector Wright. If only you recovered the gold, too." "I will continue to try, Your Grace," William said. "But like the assassins, it may be out of our reach, at least for now." Captain Renard similarly excused himself, leaving William and Lord Duncastle alone. William stood with fists clenched at his sides. The thin smile never left Lord Duncastle's lips. "I commend your persistence, Inspector," the spymaster said, "and congratulate you on bringing this matter to a swift conclusion. Pity the gold is beyond recovery." William clenched his fists tighter. He'd arrived at the audience already suspecting Duncastle. Now he aimed to confirm it. He knew how to run an interrogation, and sometimes the best approach was to bait the suspect into revealing himself. "I'll admit something, my lord. In all my time at the ministry, I've never encountered an operation this sophisticated. The forged seal, the shadow ledger, the auditing schedule. Whoever designed this understood the Treasury's procedures better than the Treasury officials themselves. That level of institutional knowledge doesn't come from a forger or a middleman. It comes from someone who built the systems in the first place." William unclenched his fists and met the spymaster's gaze. "I'd almost admire what you've done here, if not for the two dead men." Lord Duncastle studied him with what might have been amusement. "I'm curious, Inspector. What led you to me?" "You do not even deny your involvement?" "I've admitted to nothing. Besides, you have no real evidence." William's fists clenched again. Only one office in Alchester commands all 4 requirements needed to perpetrate this scheme. Yours. "Circumstantial," Duncastle said, though his fading smile suggested he found the reasoning more compelling than he cared to admit. "Your man Corvus mentioned something during our encounter. He said his employer had eyes in every shadow in this city. A curious turn of phrase, my lord. One your office has cultivated as something of a reputation." Duncastle sneered. Corvus always did talk too much. Still, a boast from a desperate criminal, a dead criminal, I should add, is hardly evidence. "What about the assassins, my lord? If I find them—" "I am now in charge of this investigation, Inspector, and unlike before, I intend to keep a close eye on you. My men will lead the search. If they find any leads, they may, at my discretion, involve the Ministry of Justice." Lord Duncastle fell silent, letting that sink in. "But until then, Inspector Wright, take the victory. You have the Duke's favor. You've solved your crime by bringing the perpetrators to justice." "Murder is not justice, sir." Lord Duncastle shrugged. "Still, it brings a certain finality to the situation, doesn't it?" "Give me one reason I shouldn't take this matter to my superiors." "Only one?" Lord Duncastle smirked. "I'll give you several. First, you value your career, or you should. Continuing to pursue this matter when I forbid it will not go well for you with the Council of Magistrates. Second, you do not wish to make an enemy of me, Inspector. In the end, your investigation caused no actual harm. An inconvenience, perhaps, but nothing my office can't correct. Disbursements from the Treasury will need to stop, of course, but there are other ways to ensure my plans come to fruition. You've caused a delay, nothing more." "Project Nightfall?" William asked. "What is it? Why the disbursements and shipments to Vrana? Are you trying to start a war?" "Pfft," Lord Duncastle said. "The exact opposite, in fact. In time, perhaps you'll understand. But for now, this meeting is over, Inspector. I bid you a good day." Lord Duncastle brushed past William, leaving before the inspector could utter another word. William stared at the empty room, shaking his head and finally sighing. He knew he should take Lord Duncastle's advice and back off. Unfortunately, that wasn't in his nature. The Duke had charged him with solving a crime and bringing the perpetrators to justice. Instead, he'd gotten 2 people killed, and the mastermind behind it all had walked free. He couldn't change any of that right now, but neither could he stop, as Lord Duncastle had advised. William didn't come from a long line of investigators. He chose this life because he wanted to make a difference. Above all else, reveal the truth, the inspector's mantra. Words he'd considered often, though he didn't think he truly understood their meaning until now. The truth demanded more of him. The truth demanded that he act. Slow at first, the wheels in his mind soon quickened. Pursuing the assassins seemed his best strategy. He had little experience in that area, so he might need to bring in an expert, not someone in the Ministry of Justice. Lord Duncastle's scrutiny made that impossible. He'd have to venture outside. A rogue operation required a rogue operative. Finding the right person might take some effort, but with Duncastle occupied with covering his tracks, he had room to breathe. William took a last look around the Duke's study. He hoped to have better news when he next stood here. Spinning around, he marched out. He had work to do. You've reached the end of this adventure. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel to get a notification when each new story is available. You can view all my books and get the latest news by visiting scottmarlowe.com.